Hello and welcome to Line Sniper Fight Night. I'm your host, Dave Milhouse. Today we're talking UFC Vegas 21 from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. I got Cody Saftic with me, and we're going to go through all the fights, starting top to bottom. Cody, how you doing today?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, this is what we would call a UFC hangover card. You got a big pay-per-view last week, 3 title fights, and now this one, it doesn't seem as appealing. It's floating under the radar, but it has a bunch of great spots, so I'm happy to be here to chat about them.
Yeah, we usually get better opportunities for, line value on these smaller cards. So although it's not as appealing to watch, I have a feeling we'll be making more money this week than we did last week. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, the Peter Yan illegal knee really cost us, and then Adesanya, I think a lot of the hype was unwarranted. Unfortunately, we were on the side that we thought that he would do something magical, and it just didn't really materialize. So I agree with the decision. I thought Blachowicz won. Unfortunately, that does nothing to help our bank accounts. But as you mentioned, a lot of the times it's these cards that you don't have these big expectations on that you can go and and put a better betting ticket together. So let's find the best available spots and go after them.
All right, well, let's start here with the main event then. We got Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad. We're seeing about a minus 250, 230-ish kind of line here. Anywhere really from, well, now it's like 245 to 280 for Leon Edwards. Look, I guess I'll kick this off. I'm not that impressed with Leon Edwards when I go through all the film study and I go through his career. I think he's just... He's good and he's clean and he does what he needs to do, but I don't think the hype is warranted. He hasn't fought a good strength of schedule, and he's very tentative in there. I mean, this guy is only landing 2.5 strikes per minute with a 47% accuracy, and he kind of just lets his opponents get comfortable, which is fine. He stays ahead and he's winning these fights. But he's easy to back up in the octagon. And here we have Belal Muhammad, who just walks forward and is going to try to bully you in the small cage. And you know what? Belal's pretty good at cutting off the angle. So when I'm looking at this fight, and I know everyone's going to be very high on Leon Edwards here, I'm actually kind of high on Belal Muhammad to the point where I'm thinking about betting him as a plus 225 underdog here. Belal lands almost double the strikes. He also gets hit with twice as many strikes. But the striking numbers, if you average them out, they're pretty equal here. The one difference really is Belal averages more takedowns. He shoots for more. He's more aggressive. He's going to have more control time, and he's going to bring that pace. And so if he wants to walk in, throw a calf kick, know that Leon's going to counter back, and then be ready for that hands up and then throw a 1-2 back, I honestly think he can win this fight just based on that. Cut off the cage, piss him off with a leg kick, counter back with a 1-2 when he counters you. He could easily stay ahead on the scorecards. Will this go the distance? I don't know. But to me, yeah, I think Leon Edwards is probably the pick to win it. But I don't think this line should be any more than like a minus 170, maybe minus 150. So I see some value on Belal Muhammad, and I'm very curious to hear your take on this main event.
Well, I think Belal Muhammad's live as an underdog, certainly. They have a similar style in that both guys have great cardio. They're able to grind out these 3, 4, 5 rounds. Belal Muhammad, you haven't seen him go 5 rounds in the UFC, but he routinely did so in Titan FC, where he was the welterweight champion over there before making the jump to the UFC. He's got great cardio. He doesn't have great stinging power. He's not somebody that's going to go out there and get a first-round knockout, go out there and get that big finish. Even as far as his submission games is okay. He's got 1 submission victory, but again, he's not really much of a finisher. And Leon Edwards on the flip side, he's got all the talent in the world, he's got all the skill in the world, but not really big for finishes. So if you've got a fight that's going to go multiple rounds, it's going to go deep, it's going to go 5 rounds, yeah, Belal Muhammad, he's the guy that's going to be in it. It's going to be a decision. It's going to be a close decision. Why not take that underdog swing? But I just think all the cards are stacked in Edwards' favor. I mean, here's a guy that was getting ready initially for Tyron Woodley. Woodley pulls out of the fight. Then he gets Khamzat Chimaev on 3 separate occasions. Chimaev pulls out all 3 times. If you see anything online, he is in ridiculously great shape. He just looks solid. Clearly, he's been working a lot on his grappling and his wrestling because he figured he would need it against both Woodley or Chimaev. And I just think he's in a really good spot. The guy's got a massive chip on his shoulder. Nobody wants to fight him. He's the number 4 ranked welterweight in the world. But again, he's already fought Kamaru Usman 8 fights ago. And by the way, he's won all 8 fights since then, and that's his current win streak. Colby Covington's on record saying he doesn't want to fight him. George Masvidal sucker punched him backstage, but is also on record saying he doesn't want to fight him. Tyron Woodley pulled out of the fight, doesn't want to fight him. He had to fight Chimaev on the basis of nobody wanted to fight Chimaev. But Edwards is a guy that doesn't really get his respect. Now, if you look at body of work, like you said, he's inactive. I think that's not his own choice. He's 29 years old, prime of his life. It's just that it's hard to find somebody to sign on the dotted lines. His big wins, though, they are kind of aged veterans. Rafael Dos Anjos, he's at the tail end of his career. Don Cerrone, he's at the tail end of his career. Gunnar Nelson, he was kind of at the tail end of his career. Those are his big wins. But again, when they matched up against Vicente Luque, you see how this guy's just able to control a lot. He's got great ring IQ. He's got great clinch. He strikes well in the clinch. I am worried about the volume. You nailed it 100%. I mean, he's not a guy that throws a whole lot of significant strikes. He's not a whole lot of output. Whereas Belal Muhammad, that's all he does. He comes at you. He's aggressive. And he's going to outpoint him. I just feel like Edwards is going to land the more significant shots, might be able to get this fight to the ground. And ultimately, he's been 5 rounds twice in his UFC career, so he should be able to bank into those championship rounds and need to be there. So I don't like the money line. Like you said, it's a little bit too big. Don't like the money line. But that Leon Edwards by decision, because I do see it going 5, and I do see him picking up the decision, is plus 120. So that's where my money lies here.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. I think the bookmakers did a good job here of basically making you make a minus EV bet on the guy who's probably going to win it. So I'll stay away. But yeah, Leon Edwards picked to win, but value-wise, probably not good enough. Let's get down here. The co-main event, Misha Cirkunov, Ryan Spann. This is another one. It looks like the money's coming in on Ryan Spann. He's kind of a public dog here. He's a big dude, hits hard. But when we go through the numbers, I don't think the line move's justified. Misha Cirkunov lands more strikes. He lands at a higher accuracy. He gets hit less, and he has a better defense percentage, like by a mile. We're talking Ryan Spann is getting hit with 54% of the strikes he faces, and Misha Cirkunov only 38%. So huge gap on the defensive front. Cirkunov's a pressure guy, literally never gets out of the first round. But you know what? Spann's got pretty good wrestling here. So the way I see this one is it actually might last a little longer than most people are thinking. But I don't know how you back Ryan Spann here against a guy who's got him edged out in every single category, including the wrestling, where Misha averages 4.4 takedowns per 15 minutes, 57% accuracy on his takedowns, 57%. I mean, Ryan Spann's only got a 60% takedown defense. So Misha's going to get this down. And once it's in his world, it's pretty much a wrap, is it not? Misha Cirkunov at about minus 120 right now. I totally disagree with the line move. I think there's some value on we'll call him a Canadian as he moved to Canada when he's young. But how do you see this one going? Is Superman Spann, more than live at a plus 100?
Yeah, I think he's live. I think both guys are live. I think regardless of how this fight goes, it's probably going to hit that under 1.5. And when you look at Misha Cirkunov, he's had 9 fights in the UFC, 7 of which have ended inside the first round, including his last 6. So he's a potent finisher, regardless if he wins or loses. If he has his way and he gets this fight to the ground, it's game over. I mean, his jiu-jitsu second to none in the division, black belt under Sam Zakula, very well-schooled guy, full-time in Las Vegas now. And again, you've seen this time and time again when he gets the Nikita Krylovs to the ground, or even in his last fight against Jimmy Crute, a Peruvian necktie. Like, these are not exactly the most common submissions. Is that Misha only needs a little bit of space. He only needs to find your neck for a second. He only needs to need an arm for a second, and all of a sudden he gets the submission victory. So again, if he is going to get this fight to the ground, it's game over for Misha. If he doesn't get this fight to the ground, his chin's not all that good, and his striking defense definitely leaves something to the imagination. Now, you can make the argument, surely, that it's like, well, he's getting knocked out by very good guys. Volkan Oezdemir knocks him out, Johnny Walker knocks him out, but both guys knock him out in like under a minute. And both guys absolutely stiffen him up really, really bad, right? They're bad knockouts. You see when he gets the fight to the ground, he's okay. When the fight stays standing, he's super labored. He's super stiff. He's 34 years old now. He's coming off a 1.5 year long layoff. If he gets touched by Ryan Spann standing, he's going down. If he gets this fight to the ground, and he's going to submit Ryan Spann. So you can make a good argument either side, but the under 1.5 seems like the most logical play, currently sitting at minus 140. Because again, I mean, if Misha has his way, he's probably finishing this thing in the first round, if not early into the second, by getting it to the ground. If he's unable to get the fight to the ground, he's getting knocked out. So if there's one thing that Ryan Spann does well, is that he's a good kickboxer. He's got a lot of power, and he's one of these guys that you look back at even at the little Nogueira fight. Another guy who's stiff, rigid, and doesn't have great striking defense. It's like that uppercut just splits him right through the middle and topples him over. Now, where does he have his downside? His cardio is not great. You take him into later rounds, he's got a problem. But with Misha, it's like Misha's cardio is not great either. He's a quick finisher. Guy hasn't been outside of the first round in like 4 or 5 years. So that's pretty telling that this thing's probably going to end quickly. It just depends, who's able to get their game plan going. I kind of leaned with Ryan Spann plus 220 by knockout. Again, if you're going to go with Misha, you can also chase the Misha by submission prop. But it's you could very make a good case either side for both guy winning. I just felt like every fight stays standing. Ryan Span's going to have his chances. And with Misha, the year and a half long layoff, he is stiff standing. Even the Jimmy Crute fight, I mean, he is getting ground and pounded pretty bad by Jimmy Crute before hitting a sweep and then locking in the Peruvian necktie. Like there are massive holes in his game. Hopefully Span can go out there and exploit it. Last thing I want to say is that Sam's fight with Sam Alvey, people keep bringing it up as like that's the huge red flag here with him, is that he barely squeaked by Sam Alvey. But again, the first 2 rounds, the first round in particular, he looks like $1 million. And then after that, his cardio falls off. If he comes out and looks like $1 million in the first round against Misha, he puts him away. So again, I'm looking to bank more so on the under 1.5 rounds minus 140. But if I had to make a direct play on either side, I think I'm leaning Span, and I'd want to juice that up to the 220 by going Span by TKO. Or actually, it might be 240, but either way, it's a good plus money tag.
Yeah, it's interesting angles. Both guys have big holes. The cardio, like you mentioned, could be a big factor if we do see round 2. In which case, the live betting lines are available. You will probably be wanting to look at Misha Cirkunov, who, if it gets there, he might even be behind on the scorecards going into round 2. So that could be just a huge plus EV move. But, we'll have to see how round 1 unfolds. Next up, Dan Ige, Gavin Tucker. This is one that, I like quite a bit. Why don't you start this one up and I'll finish it off for us?
Yeah, so I'm actually would love to hear your opinion. I'm having mixed takes on it. So all week I've been honing in for Dan Ige. I think that he's going to go out there. He's got good cardio. He's going to push a pace on him. He's going to try to mix in a couple takedowns, try to make this ugly for Gavin Tucker. But honestly, the more I think about it, it's like, where does he really pull away with this fight? So Gavin Tucker has all the same skills and probably puts them to better use. I mean, BJJ black belt for Dan Ige, but it's like, okay, Gavin Tucker is also a black belt, very credited. They're both physically strong guys. Ige's wrestling advantage probably nullified with the fact that Gavin Tucker is going to have the strength advantage, and again, is a good wrestler. So if this ends up being a striking match, I think Ige is going to be wily. He's going to be in his face. He's going to be the one coming forward. But the technical boxing, again, it goes to Gavin Tucker. The kicking goes to Gavin Tucker. What we saw versus Dan Ige versus Calvin Kattar was that if he's not able to get this fight to the ground and it's forced to be a striking exchange, he's just a little bit too wild. He arguably lost the Edson Barbosa fight and was massively hurt in the first round. But again, it's that ability to just move forward on these guys and break them down that allowed him to get that win. Not able to do it against Calvin Kattar, in which he loses 4 rounds to 1. Gavin Tucker, I don't want to call him a poor man's version of Calvin Kattar. I just mean he's able to go out there and replicate the same game plan, which is keep this fight standing and use those technical boxing skills. Now, he is coming in on short notice. That I don't love. I want to wait till tomorrow so we can see the final weigh-ins. Today. Yeah, today's the final weigh-ins, later today. And have a great indication of, how he looks on the scale. Does he look filled out? But yeah, now the more that the week progresses, the more that you do more film study, the more you think about it, it's like he is a live underdog, so maybe worth a shot at that. I don't see him knocking out Ige. I don't see him submitting Dan Ige. So again, you're going to probably try to juice this up by taking it, fight goes the distance. And if you don't have a great lean on either side, you can go fight goes the distance. But this is not as good of a price tag as the last couple times we've mentioned it, right? So I think I'm officially going to. See, I don't want to switch my pick. Like I'm hard to switch my pick, but I think a pass. The fact that I'm having this much concern on it, thinking both ways, both guys got a viable path to victory. Seems like the money is on Gavin Tucker. The plus money that would make you think that this is the value side. If you're going to take a shot on it, it'd be dog or pass. Take the value side bet. It'd be Gavin Tucker. But again, Dan Ige was my pick earlier in the week, and so I'm not fully off of him yet. It's just I'm really overthinking this one. I think so. Pass for me on this particular matchup. Although it probably will be fight of the night.
Okay, well, I'm not passing on this one. I locked in Dan Ige. When I go through the film and we talk about who's the more technical boxer, I actually side with Ige. His hand speed is way faster. It's not even comparable to Gavin Tucker's. I watched and watched and watched. I was trying to make sure I'm not just seeing things. It is way faster. And if we look at the strength of schedule, Calvin Kattar, Barboza, Bektic, these guys are quite a bit better than Billy Quarantillo, Justin James. I mean, it's not even comparable. So when Dan Ige is not the better fighter in the ring, he's still in there getting dirty and making a pretty good account of himself. He gave Kattar a really tough round 1, a couple of close rounds after that, but Kattar started turning it on. Kattar's one of the best boxers in the UFC. Barboza's one of the best strikers in the UFC. Caught him with something bad early, and he was able to, fight through that, keep giving her. He actually ended up winning the fight. I thought he lost the fight, but regardless, it was that close of a fight with Edson after being hurt early. And these are two guys that are, top-notch strikers in the UFC. And we look at what Gavin Tucker's been doing. Yeah, he's been looking good, but he's fighting bottom of the barrel. Maybe not bottom of the barrel, but like lower level competition. And, he's looking pretty good doing it, but I do think his hand speed is far too slow here. And so now Ige's the better striker for the first time in a while. He's still getting better. The guy's young. He's entering the prime of his career, where Gavin Tucker's entering the ladder of it. And I think Ige is the kind of guy that's going to get better every fight, and has been. He's just been fighting guys that are quite a bit better still. So coming off this Kattar fight, I expect we see the best version of Dan Ige. Does he have to get this to the ground to win it? I don't think so. I think he just has to land more strikes. And if I'm being completely honest, I think he has no trouble landing more strikes than Gavin Tucker in this one, because he's got that hand speed advantage. I'm very sure that his hands are faster. So as long as he wants to play with volume, I trust his chin. And that's really all it should take to get ahead in this one. The wrestling should cancel itself out. I do like Gavin Tucker. I think he's a good fighter. But I think this is quite a big step up for him. This isn't Justin James or young Billy Quarantillo here, or even Glenn, who smoked him.
Almost killed him.
Killed him. And you know what? Dan Ige is a good fighter. He's been fighting in the top 10 for a while now. And I don't quite think Gavin he's fringe top 10. Ige's got a higher ceiling. Ige is still young and getting better. I like Dan Ige all day here. He's my favorite bet on the card, as far as, it's not the most confident bet on the card. We'll save that for later, but the odds would reflect my confidence in that other pick. Bang for buck, Dan Ige all day. I think he wins a clean 30-27 type fight here. So what's that take us to here? J-Mart, Jonathan Martinez, Davey Grant. This is one where I think everyone is just all over Jonathan Martinez, right? Not much respect for Davey Grant. But when I go through the numbers, I think, based on the odds, I would say Davey Grant's live here. He does shoot more takedowns, and he might get his way with it. And, some of these rounds just might be close. He throws pretty heavy shots too. So I'm not sold on it being a good bet by any means, but I have trouble wanting to back Jonathan Martinez at this minus 300-ish line. Like I just said about the takedowns, Davey Grant's averaging 2.59 per 15 minutes, and he's landing at a 47% clip. And Jonathan Martinez is only stuffing them at a 61% clip. So at some point, Davey Grant's going to get this down. We're in the small cage. It forces the grappling. If we look at the striking numbers, very similar in terms of percentages landed. The volume is just a little bit higher for Jonathan Martinez, but he's also getting hit with a strike in a third more. So striking numbers, very similar. Strength of schedule, it's very similar. This guy fought Marlon Vera and, Bermudez. So at the end of the day, I think this fight's actually pretty close. But I'm not really willing to take a shot on Davey Grant quite yet. Why don't you walk us through this one? Am I seeing things, or is it J-Mart all day?
Yeah, it seems like it's probably going to be J-Mart all day. So when you look at his early run in the UFC, when he first signed and fought, Andre Sukumatev and some of those early fights, he is a definite work in progress. He's a flashy striker, but he just doesn't have all the elements of a well-rounded MMA game. But he's young, man, and even now he comes into this fight 26 years old, and he is now starting to feel himself and look good. You go back to the Pingyu Liu fight, where he really puts on a good striking clinic, but then in the third round is able to knock him out with that knee straight up the middle. A very nice highlight reel finish. Then you go to the Andre Ewell fight, right? It shows decision loss for Jonathan Martinez, but almost everybody scored the fight for him, like all the media members and, all the fans. Like it was widely considered a robbery. But again, you see him go in that fight, and it's just like he's looking like a much better version of himself. The Frankie Saenz fight, that's where he follows it up, third round knockout again. Now, Saenz wrestled at Arizona State University. Saenz is 37 years old, but here's a guy that fought Uriah Faber. Here's a guy that's fought at a high level in the UFC. He's old-timey grinder. Shouldn't he be able to get this fight to the ground? But it's like all of a sudden Martinez's footwork and his elusiveness, and he's really quick, and you're walking into danger a lot of the time. And then sure enough, he follows that up by getting a career-high victory now. They match him up against Thomas Almeida. Once upon a time, everybody's darling. Came into the Cody Garbrandt fight as a 3-1 favorite once upon a time. And now they're building Thomas Almeida back, and Jonathan Martinez just goes out there and absolutely works him. So there's a lot that you like out of him. And when I look at Davey Grant, you talk about strength of schedule. He's got that Marlon Vera win. Davey Grant fights like once every few years, and that's been his biggest hamper, is that he's just been injured so long. Guy fought on the Ultimate Fighter against Chris Holdsworth like 6 years ago, and then since that time, he's only accrued like 6 fights in the UFC. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's 33 years old. He's a British wrestler, which generally doesn't work out for for European wrestlers is not exactly a thing in the UFC. So I think he is going to struggle to get this fight to the ground. But the angle that I'm approaching is that, yeah, Martinez is too big of a favorite, 3-1. So we'll agree on that. But Jonathan Martinez is live by knockout, right? So Davey Grant doesn't show these knockout losses. He shows submission losses. But when you look back against the Martin Day fight, that's his last time out, he got dropped by Martin Day, seriously hurt by him. Now, Martin Day is 0-4 in the UFC, fanned right out, didn't give a very good account of himself. But he was in a tough match with Davey Grant where Davey Grant couldn't take him down at one point and was just forced to brawl with him. Does knock him out. Davey Grant does get the win, but he got hurt. The Manny Bermudez fight as well, it's only 59 seconds, but he gets hurt by a one-dimensional grappler who missed weight, was too big. He gets hurt in that fight as well. So when you look at Jonathan Martinez shows a third-round TKO or flat-out knockout over Pyungyu Liu, and he shows a third-round flat-out knockout of Frankie Saenz. I think he gets out Davey Grant. I think he gets him out late. So Jonathan Martinez, money line, again, a little too big. Jonathan Martinez by knockout, plus 245. Like it. Jonathan Martinez by third round finish, 11-1. So I'm thinking that this kid goes out there and, like you mentioned on the last fight, one guy's entering the prime of his career in Dan Ige, and one guy's kind of on those back now. That's how this is. Davey Grant never really achieved much status. His losses in the UFC, I mean, come on, he's losing to like Damian Stasiak. Like, he's not exactly given a great account of himself. His wins in the UFC, Martin Day, the Marlon Vera one, that's a key. That's a big one. But it's 4 years ago, it's a long time, and Marlon Vera is just not the same guy. And when you rewatch the fight, it's just kind of, he lands on top of him a few times and ends up greasing it out, right? But I see this one going different. I think Martinez is live for that knockout and for that third round finish, which at 11-1, why not worth a sprinkle, right?
Yeah, I can get down with that. I wasn't liking the minus 300, but if you want to get fancy with it, sure, he's got a puncher's chance for sure when it gets late. Let's move on here. Menel Cape, Matias Nicolao. This is one where I thought, hey, I'll probably be on Cape early. And then I go back and I watch some film and I start to realize this guy's like, how do we put this? Like the flyweight version of Bobby Green with more swagger and less strikes, right? Like, what was he doing against Pantoja? He was in that fight, but he was too busy like doing dance moves and stuff instead of throwing punches. Like, all he needed was volume. He probably, I'm not saying he would have beat Pantoja, but the rounds weren't that far off. They're like a few strikes up for Pantoja each time, and this guy wasted like 12 minutes of the 15 minutes of the fight. Like, what an idiot. I can't back people like that. There's no use for them. But the problem with Menel Cape here is he's a bit of a counterpuncher. And when we take a look at Nicolao, same thing. They both like the other guy to go first. Nicolao has a very good defense in his UFC career, posting a 70% defense. He got knocked out by Ortiz in his last one. Then he went back and fought in a different organization. He looked okay. The competition wasn't great. But when I'm watching it, yeah, I do think this guy can stay out of trouble. He's very alert on the defensive end. Cape's just kind of only throwing a few shots a minute, and they're all, the big shot. I think this guy can avoid enough of them. And because of that, I kind of like the over. The 2.5 sitting around a pick 'em. I think this goes over 2.5 again because neither guy is too aggressive. Neither guy wants to be the one aggressing forward. They both want to counter. And so we might not see that many strikes per minute from either guy in this fight. Now, Nicolao, he's a really reasonably sharp striker, I would say, for how good people are thinking he is going into this fight. Now, he's no Pantoja, but this guy is probably a top 15 flyweight. So if Cape's just going to stand there and kind of just try to look cool, he might find himself behind again. I guess my only issue here is he must realize how he blew his last fight, which was only a couple weeks ago. And if he does, then he might make the adjustments and come out aggressive. And so I'm not sure I'm going to take this over, but it sure stands out to me as, a pretty slow-paced flyweight fight. So pretty damn good chance it goes the distance here. What do you see happening in this fight? I mean, if we just go over just pure hard numbers, it's Nicolao at the plus 110-ish line, I think is where the value is for a side. But yeah, that over speaks to me. Talk to me about this one, Cody.
Yeah, well, I agree with the over. I think that's the way to go. If you look at Cap's last fight, like there's absolutely no urgency in it. And they're also 125-pound men. Like it's not exactly, it's not necessarily going to be a quick finish. I think this one does hit some overs, probably does go the distance. I am going to go the other side and go Menel cap, and it's mostly just speculation over anything else. But it's kind of like you alluded to, the fact that he must realize that he blew it in his debut a few weeks ago. Surely his coaches have sat him down. Surely they've looked over the tape and just been like, all right, so here and here, if you throw 2 more strikes, you win the round. But here's where I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? So one, he's only 27 years old, so he's still young. He's still got time to improve, and this was definitely a learning experience, which would be good for him. But imagine all the obstacles that this guy had to overcome to make his debut. First of all, his last fight, it's his UFC debut. That's tough for anybody. Second of all, a 1.5 year long layoff. That's a problem for anybody. Third of all, first time fighting in the United States and ever. He'd been fighting in Japan. When he was fighting in Japan, he would fight in a ring. When he was fighting in Japan in a ring, he would wear shoes. This is all different. So now you drop the shoes. You're fighting in a cage. You're fighting in the United States, or you're fighting, outside of Japan, I should say, right? Which is a different experience. You're coming off a long layoff, and they give you Alexander Pantoja? You mean the guy that's a top 5 flyweight? You mean the guy that went tit for tat, 3 hard rounds with Davidson Figueiredo, the current champion, gave an excellent account of himself? That guy? Yeah. And you mean to tell me that Menel cap barely lost that fight? It was his own accord. He lost because he chose not to do anything. Well, then that really screams that this is a very skillful individual who just fought a very terrible game plan. But now we're getting him on a 3-week turnaround. Octagon jitters out of the way. Ring time, he just got 3 rounds. Just hung with an elite level flyweight. Got a better account of how the cage works. And when you look back at the fight, yeah, there's a lot of not him throwing, but also he scored 2 takedowns, and they were always with 10 seconds left. But you'd see him just pick up Pantoja and literally just dump him. And it was like, why didn't you do that earlier? Well, it's like, well, you know what? Pantoja, high-level black belt, and I'm only a brown belt. Apparently a very high-level brown belt. People that I know that have trained with him say that his grappling is really good. But it's like, did you want to play the ground game with Pantoja? No. Against Nicolao, also a black belt, but not the same level. Why not score a few takedowns, mix in those few strikes? This thing probably goes the distance, like you say, but I'll give him another shot here. I'll give him a shot. I did have Pantoja last time. I was happy to get the decision, but don't get me wrong, it wasn't an easy unanimous. I felt a little sweaty as I went to the scorecards. If Cap just does a little bit more, surely he could capitalize. And Nicolao is in Cap's situation. He's coming in from a different organization. He hasn't fought in a 1.5 years. He's making his return to the UFC, not debut, but he's going to feel those jitters back in the organization, first time in years. Cap, a little more comfortable, a little more volume. He gets the decision. That's where I'm going with this one.
Yeah, if he wants to be more active, then I would pick him all day. And one thing to note here is the amount of respect the odds makers gave him against Pantoja literally froze me. I was like, is this a joke? How is this a pick 'em? Is Pantoja the ultimate trap line? And I'm digging, and instead of betting Pantoja, I got totally spooked. And I said, man, this dude might actually knock him out. He's got the power. He looks like a pretty good fighter. But then when he's in there, yeah, too much goofing around, not enough volume. I guess, we'll learn a lot here this week. This is a winnable fight for him. Very winnable fight. But you know what? Nicolao's better than people think. That would be my opinion there too. So very close fight. He should be able to hold his own. Tickle that over 2.5. I think I'm going to have to lock that in after the show. Let's go to the dental office here. The dentist, Darren Stewart, Eric Anders. These are 2 guys that haven't had the greatest of careers. They're average level fighters, and yeah, they lose to too much average competition, I guess we could say, or maybe not average. I guess we could say Darren Stewart's losing to the good guys, beating the not so good guys. And Eric Anders seems to find a way to lose to almost everybody that's okay. But when I'm looking this fight over, I think the striking numbers are very similar. Anders does get hit more, but he seems to be getting a little bit better as his career goes on in that regard. But he's got the wrestling advantage. Darren Stewart isn't too savvy stuffing takedowns. So I think if Anders wants to press forward here, and try to get his hands locked, he should be able to take Darren Stewart down. And if he can get enough control time, I do think he's live to win this, and he's sitting at about a plus 150. So I'm not looking to back Darren Stewart. I think he is slightly better. But, value-wise, it feels like it's on Anders to me here. I still don't have much interest in this fight. Seems very close. Probably does go the distance if we're looking for another over. But, yeah, I guess I have to lean towards your boy, Eric Anders, for in terms of value here, I guess Darren Stewart would be my pick to win, but the line is a little widespread for my liking. Cody, what do you got here?
Yeah, I just can't pick Anders anymore. I mean, I'm willing to take a shot at Menel Cap because it's like, well, he fought a bad game plan. The one fight. It's one fight. Eric Anders fights a bad game plan. It's 10 fights now, man. It's just not getting any better. He's got unbelievably bad ring IQ. He just bobs when he's supposed to weave. Does he have the wrestling advantage? Potentially. Is he going to go out there and pursue takedowns for 15 minutes? Like, no, he just doesn't do enough. His striking, guy's got big power, but he never really lets his hands go. And you see him just let fights slip away from him, you know? Here's a guy that was once a favorite in a UFC main event in Brazil against Lyoto Machida, former champion, you know, a legend of the sport. He's a favorite over him. That's how much belief they had. And he could have won the fight, lost a split decision in Brazil. Could have won the fight if he just did a little bit more, but he didn't. Then you see the Tim Williams fight, the third-round knockout, but the whole leading up until it's like he's just not doing anything. You know, the Khalil Roundtree fight, atrocious beating, very, very brutal beating, right? His Thiago Santos fight, his corner has to throw in the towel after 3 rounds. It's an absolutely brutal beating. When he fights lower-level talent, he can get the win over them, but even then, the Gerald Mearshart fight, he struggles, split decision loss, split decision win, but, you know, doesn't give a great account of himself. There's just not enough. Here's a guy that won a national title, college football, with the University of Alabama. Here's a guy that is a great athlete. He's got power. He's a former LFA champion. He's got decent cardio, paces himself. His chin, for as much damage as he takes, he's always eating these big shots and making it to the 3rd round, you know, making it later in these fights. The guy can take a punch. He's got all these intangibles to be a good fighter. He just doesn't tie it together. Darren Stewart, flip side, comes to the UFC. No expectations, right? No one expects this guy to be good. It's not that he's great, but it's like he routinely plays a spoiler. You know, he's the underdog to Bavon Lewis. He's the underdog to Deron Winn. The Bartosz Fabinski fight, it's like that's how Fabinski fights, so I'm going to give him a pass on that one. The Maki Pitolo fight, you know, he shows you that he's like shoring up his grappling a little bit. And his cardio, you know, the Kevin Holland fight. It's a split decision loss against Kevin Holland, a guy that's now top 10 in the division, a guy that just knocked out Jacare Souza and is ever improving. He loses a split to him. But in the 3rd round, man, he's raining it down on him. He's got on top of Holland. He's talking shit. He's smashing him up. Unfortunately, it's too little too late and he loses a decision. But his cardio looked good in that fight. It's the 3rd round and you're smashing on Kevin Holland. So that's all good signs from Darren Stewart. The problem is his takedown defense is a little lackluster. So he needs to keep this fight standing. And then the problem with that is that he doesn't throw enough volume, right? Neither does Anders, but not enough that I would comfortably say that Darren Stewart's going to pull away with it. So what I like in this fight is the fight goes the distance, which is minus 195, not a great price. But I think that Darren Stewart doesn't throw a ton. And again, Eric Anders is super durable. And flip side to that, Stewart's durable enough that I don't think Anders is taking him out into the distance. So we're looking for fight goes the distance minus 195. But I had to make a specific play on one side of this. I would go with Darren Stewart. And again, I've mentioned this in a couple fights already. Because I don't necessarily agree with the money line, I'd want to turn it into a plus money. I think it goes the distance. I got Darren Stewart by decision, plus 140. So that's how I would turn a not great money line into a plus money play, is say that, you know, better guys have not knocked out Anders, and I don't think he submits Anders. So I think if he's going to win, it's going to the scorecards.
That sounds about right to me. Plus 140 is not horrible if you want some action. Let's move it on here. Angela Hill, Ashley Yoder. You know, the Hill line just keeps climbing up. We're in that minus 400 range now. And I'm not really opposed to it. I know I'm one of the few guys that actually respects Angela Hill to be that big of a favorite over Yoder. But that's just because she throws literally twice as many strikes and lands twice as many strikes. She has much better striking accuracy. She's 8% better on the accuracy front, and she's a million miles better on the defensive front. Angela Hill has a 63% striking defense. Ashley Yoder has a 47% striking defense. So massive gap there. And what's most impressive about it for me is the strength of schedule in which, you know, these stats were derived from. Angela Hill, although she fights some bums once in a while because she'll fight anyone any day and tries to get 8 fights a year in, she has fought the better level of competition, and she's, you know, made a pretty good account of herself in those fights. She lost to Watterson. She lost to Gedalia. Those are both so close. You could score them for Angela Hill. Making a good account of herself against top-level competition. These girls are like top 6, 7, you know, in the division. And if you take a look at what Ashley Yoder has achieved, she's never beat anybody that's good, period. And if we're being real honest, you go down her list, most of the girls that Ashley Yoder is fighting are more grapple-heavy type UFC fighters, not exactly the greatest of strikers. And so when we look at her striking numbers and you go, you only land 2.8 per minute against people like Marcos, Sosa, Kondo, Cooper, Granger. I mean, Granger stinks. That's a busted prospect right there. But yeah, you're only landing 2.8 per minute. You're getting hit with 3.3, and you have a negative striking versus expected percentage here when you're only landing 41%, but you're getting hit with 53% from these girls that aren't good strikers. Angela Hill's the best striker that Yoder is ever going to face. And as long as this is on the feet, Angie's going to look really, really good. If Angie can keep it standing, it's an absolute slam dunk. I guess that's the real question. Can Yoder get her to the ground, keep her on the ground long enough to win the rounds that way? I don't really think so. Angie is posting a 77% takedown defense over her career. But if I'm being real honest, she's been working hard on that and been getting better. And in the last 2 years has been much better with her takedown defense. I can say, yeah, she's still giving up takedowns, but Claudia Gadelha is one thing. Ashley Yoder is another. Michelle Watterson is one thing. Ashley Yoder is another. So, yeah, I mean, Yoder's the bigger girl here. She's 4 inches taller, 5 more inches of reach. But that reach is useless if you can't throw hands. So I like Angela Hill here. I think she wins this by a decision. You can get that around a minus 175. And, now that we're at that minus 175 by decision type of line, I don't think there's a ton of value there. Possibly could be a little bit higher. But if you want the action, that's the way to play this. I actually had this locked in a couple weeks ago when they were supposed to fight, but I got it at minus 160. I thought that's pretty much the cutoff if you want some value. Now these girls are going through 2 weight cuts in like 2 weeks. No thanks, I'm out of it. But yeah, why don't you talk me through this? Is Ashley Yoder live at this plus 300 range or even higher at some books? 325.
Yeah, well, Yeah, people think that she is just because both women actually already fought previously. It was a close fight, went to decision. Ashley Yoder scored 3 takedowns in that fight over Angela Hill, but ultimately Angela Hill got back up to her feet and landed the more significant strikes, and that's how I see this one playing out as well. You've nailed on all the points. If you look at her last 2 opponents alone, she takes on Michelle Watterson, former title challenger, and she takes on Claudia Gadelha, former title challenger. She gives up 1 takedown to each woman. The Watterson fight, 1 for 18. So she stuffed 17 takedowns and gave up 1. And when she gave it up, she got back up. The Claudia Gadelha fight, 1 for 4, right? So she gave up 1 takedown, stuffed the other 3. If these are much better wrestlers than Yoder, and they're not taking you down multiple times, and certainly you're making adjustments in those fights, not being held down, not being taken down routinely, she's made the improvements. Since they last fought, Angela Hill's fought 11 times, right? She's fought girls like Jessica Andrade. She's fought girls like Watterson and Claudia Gadelha, who we've already spoken about. She's fought girls like Luca Bume. Like, she's been in there with a better level of competition. And yeah, again, they're always going to decision, but she's generally coming on the right side of those decisions. This fight's the same way. I think Ashley Yoder is probably going to score a takedown or 2. She'll try to slow down the pace a little bit, but ultimately it's going to come down to striking volume. Striking volume favors Angela Hill. It's rebooked. It's a big line. I get that. And, same theme, repetitive, I guess, at this point. But you don't want to pay minus 400 on Angela Hill. But Angela Hill is going to win this fight. It's going to be by decision. So you're going to go with that Angela Hill by decision, minus 175, as you mentioned. Much better than 4-1. That's where I'd be as well.
Yeah, that seems about right. I think she gets it done. I might have to actually just put a little degenerate action on there, even if I'm sure the line's getting pretty good. It just seems like it's going to happen. The rounds will be sort of close and sort of competitive, but she's just going to be that little bit ahead the whole time. Let's move this on to Ronnie Yahya, Ray Rodriguez. When I seen the words Yahya and minus 300, I laughed, and then I watched some tape and I thought that might not be high enough. Ray Rodriguez sucks. Hope you're not watching, Ray. I doubt you are, but if you do, you got some work to do, brother. Not a good look. Your 2 UFC fights, absolutely pitiful. You're only landing 1 strike a minute. You're getting hit with 5.7. That's the kind of spread that's bad for business. Ronnie Yahya is not exactly the type of striker you got to fear, but this guy's grappling is on the kind of level where you can't afford to let him grapple you. He just loves it on the ground. Yahya has a takedown defense of 24%. Do you think he tried to stop any of those takedowns? No, he wants this on the ground. He can't wait to get on the ground. Please take me down, sir. So Ray's not going to want to implement any of his wrestling, which he does like to do. Ray Rodriguez has a 50% takedown accuracy, and he's landing 2.3 per 15 minutes, so it's almost one a round. You don't want to do that to Ronnie Yahya. You want to keep this standing. And he's a horrible striker. So I think they're pretty well even on the feet. I mean, maybe we could say Ray Rodriguez is a little bit better on the feet. But when we're talking on the ground, this is Yahya's world. And I don't think it'll be long if it gets to the ground before he's submitted him. And having said that, the far better competition for Ronnie Yahya. He's got a long UFC career. Ray Rodriguez, you know, he's not exactly a young buck. This guy's a year younger than me, so still pretty old for the UFC. So, I mean, starting his UFC career so late, I think he's just kind of in there to be a filler, a bit of a punching bag. He got smoked by Gravely. He got smoked by Kelleher. And, you know, just not looking good. So, yeah, he's got a chance if he can keep this one on the feet for sure. But I don't think he can keep it on the feet. I think the easy play here is Ronnie Yahya. And you might want to look at that submission prop because there's going to be a few submission attempts in this fight. And I would imagine that Yahya actually, you know, seals the deal here. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I see a little bit of value on Yahya at minus 300. Just saying that sounds so wrong. But both these guys suck, and sometimes you suck a little less than the other guy. So that's my pick. What do you feel in this one, Cody?
Yeah, so Ray Rodriguez got subbed in under a minute by Brian Kelleher's last time out. The guy's also been subbed in the first round by leg kick master Chris Gutierrez, and that was all that long ago. You see the Tony Gravely fight where his ground game lets him down again, and then that's the theme here is that Ray Rodriguez, most of his wins are by submission. He's got 8 wins by submission versus only 3 by knockout. He's looking to grapple. Unfortunately, if he grapples anybody better than him, it's to his demise. Ronnie Yahya, 2003 ADCC champion, you know, a very, very potent black belt who shows many wins by submission. If this thing hits the ground, one would assume it's over. If I stay standing, Ronnie Yahya actually does have the striking advantage. Guy's actually improved his striking a lot. It's not very good, but because he does not care about getting taken down, he'll just throw caution to the wind. What are you going to do? Take me down? You're going to catch this kick? Take me down? He's already like pulling guard. Most of his takedowns is he's pulling guard. He's like, okay, let's do this. Fight hits the ground, it's game over. I would be all in on Ronnie Yahya. I am going to chase that Ronnie Yahya submission prop. Like literally the only one thing that would be causing me a little bit of cause for concern is that Ronnie Yahya's always had bad cardio. Awful cardio, repetitive theme. I've been watching this guy since he's 26. He's 36 now. It's just very repetitive theme throughout his career is that he's got bad cardio. So now he's 36. He's coming back to the UFC after like a 1.5 year long layoff. One would assume his cardio is not getting any better. So if he doesn't finish Ray Rodriguez in the first round and a half, and he starts to get tired and it becomes a greasy striking battle between 2 lower level strikers, it's like, yeah, anything can happen. I'm looking to pre-fight bet Ronnie Yahya by submission, Ronnie Yahya inside the distance, whatever. It's obviously not going to be TKO, I don't think. But beyond that, you know, we spoke earlier about a live betting opportunity. This would be it, right? We're assuming Ronnie's going to blow through him, and that would be good. If for whatever reason Ronnie's in the second round and starts to huff and puff and hasn't quite put Ray away, that's my chance to hedge out and get out of it because I don't see Ronnie winning any third rounds against anybody. He's just too tired, right? And this would be a similar spot, but I don't think Ray's making it to the third round with Ronnie regardless. So, yeah, submission prop.
Yeah. And what do we have for a submission prop on that one? I think
it's plus 120 Ronnie Yahya, I believe, by submission. Money probably coming in on it. Seems like that's the path of victory, but it's better than 3-1 straight up, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing a plus 120, but it hasn't moved at all yet. I guess this is just opening up on some books. Some have it been bet down to a minus 105 already. Look, when you see a UFC fighter with a submission prop around a pick'em, that should tell you just about all you need to know. Usually we're looking at like plus 800 for something that specific. Yahya's going to choke this guy out or break his arm or something. It's just a matter of time. Great matchup for him. I mean, it's not often you can say great matchup for Ronnie Yahya. Today we get to say it. And now let's wrap this up with Nasrat Haqparast, Rafa Garcia. Look, it's minus 400, but that's not high enough. Nasrat should be minus 800. This is the lock of the night. If you need some accumulators, some parlay action, or just don't mind laying that kind of chalk, I think you take Nasrat Haqparast. I mean, if you're investing in stocks and stuff, you think you get a 15% return on investment in a year is good. You just hit this minus 400, you make even more than that. It's a pretty reasonable deal here if we really think about how much trouble Rafa Garcia is going to be able to give a boxer like Nasrat. I just don't think any. So it's basically like going into sparring here. And I do think this line will continue to get bet up, and I do think it'll close over minus 600. So it's not really a lot to say. We have pretty good UFC level competition in Nasrat. Garcia making his UFC debut here. He looks okay. He's never lost a fight, but when I'm watching the film, the guys he's fighting they're not on a UFC level, not even close. And I won't say that he doesn't belong. He could be a bottom feeder type guy in the UFC, but Nasrat's just way too far up the MMA ladder for him. And I just see this line is just going to keep going, and it might not ever stop going. Cody, do you agree with me here, or is this way too chalky?
I mean, it's a tough debut, but there's just too many uncertainties on Rafa Garcia. Listen, I mean, is he in way too deep against Nasrat Haqparast? Yeah, I would agree. But listen, he's only 26 years old. He's 12-0. He trains at a pretty good gym. And he's a banger. He's going to come forward. He's going to look to throw hands. The one concern with Nasrat Haqparast is the Drew Dober fight. He gets knocked out in a minute, but it looked like he had a bad weight cut. Then he actually pulled out of his last fight against Arman Sarukian due to illness related to a weight cut. When you see his frame, he's a pretty big 55er, and I don't think he's having very good weight cuts. So is there a possibility that Rafa Garcia just comes out here and lets his hands go early and is maybe able to capitalize on a vulnerable Haqparast? Maybe. But I'm a Nasrat guy, man. I mean, he's young, training at a TriStar. I like his intangibles, great volume. Chin outside of the Dober fight has been pretty good. Finds ways to win, good ring IQ, only getting better. I mean, I'm on him for sure. It's just, it is a big price tag. Money's going to continue to come on it. So at this point, I want to chase that Nasrat inside the distance prop. But even then, it's like there's just too many knowns on Rafa Garcia. And, the joke being is that if it was a full Garcia, it would still be a tough fight. And this is only a half a Garcia. So it's going to be a really tough fight for sure. I got Nasrat. I got a feeling that I don't want, like you're certain on it. I feel like I want to be certain on it. But this is another spot where I really want to see the weigh-ins. I really want to see how Haqparast looks. And I am going to be sweating a little bit. He could come out and look like a minus 1,000, right? He could come out and look like a minus 250. Like he could come out and look like an even money guy. I'm not really sure the version that we're going to get from him. Him at his best, easy. Him at his worst could be tough. And with Garcia, he hasn't fought great guys, but again, he's actually fought 3 UFC veterans already, and they're the lower level guys that were already released from the organization, but he always routinely gave a good account of himself in those spots. He's been 5 rounds in his latest outing. There are some things that you could take away that you do like from him. It's just talk about a tough debut, man. Haqparast knows how it is. He had to make his UFC debut against Marcin Held. It was a bad matchup. Since then, they've built him along. He's done good. Garcia might be the same way. He might lose his debut and then build along, but it's just too much too soon. So I'm going to agree. I'm going to go with Haqparast as well.
All right, Haqparast it is. It's going to close minus 600. It's time to get him in now if you want those parlays. All right, guys, that's it for Line Sniper Fight Night. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Cody. And we'll see you next week for some more fights.